Too many people, want to see the positive in things and want this reality that they're focused on to unfold and this bright future and this golden age and everything they're talking about, but they're simply not being realistic in looking at what the Earth is doing, what the human race is doing, and what mechanisms we have for survival through the upheavals that are coming. There's always some particular rogue government that needs to be overthrown. There's always some people suffering somewhere. There's always starvation. There's always these financial crises and economic crisis and housing crisis and social crisis and all the things that they throw at us. All stuff to keep us worried, keep us looking here and looking there and never really looking around us. Never really looking at what we are in relation to the Earth, what it means to be human. We're all sent to these indoctrination camps that are disguised as schools and educated in what to think, not how to think, but what to think. And from that point, as life progresses, things generally get harder and harder and more difficult for people as they go along, And by the time people are middle-aged, they're just sort of running around, keeping their heads down, keeping between the lines and hurrying off to work and doing what they're told and doing everything they can to keep their head above water. Don't disturb me. Don't tell me what's going on around me. Don't tell me what the politicians are doing. I don't want to hear about the corruption. I've got this little thing that works for me. I can get through my life this way. Just leave me alone so I can have my television at the end of the day and my coffee in the morning and I'm good. That's the mentality that people are programmed into, and they just keep their heads down and they don't want to look at what's going on around them. And no matter how much we attempt to change things and make the world better, nothing ever changes. The wars continue, the financial strife continues, the economic crisis continues, the social crisis continues, it all continues, nothing ever changes. When we do try to attempt to make some change, all we end up with is political theatre. Stuff like we see now. Political scandals, impeachments, the left and the right arguing back and forth against each other. But look at the left and the right. Who is the left and the right? Who are all these politicians? We may think that they are simply people who are elected of the people, for the people, by the people, all that sort of stuff that we're told. But really, when you look at them, folks, how come they're all billionaires and millionaires? Every politician on earth is a millionaire or a billionaire. No normal people actually get to be normal politicians and get to be put into a position of power anywhere. They're all part of the millionaires club, and they all support the same agenda. That's what politics is. It isn't there to help people. It isn't there to create a beneficial system for society or mankind. It's there to manage people into compliance with the ruling parasites so they can keep stealing. That's what they do, folks, but unfortunately most of the world has Stockholm syndrome and actually sees these people as something wonderful that they should aspire to be like and that they should admire and they should fawn towards and be excited to meet them and all sorts of stuff like that. They're a bunch of parasites, folks. And the main goal of that system is to keep people distracted so they never notice what's actually going on around them. Keep them tied up worrying about theatres of conflict and political rhetoric and all this stuff that they think means something when it doesn't. But they're all parasites, folks, and they're all groomed for the positions that they hold. And it doesn't really matter what country you look at, it's the same in every country. What has happened to our society over the last couple of generations is a dramatic loss in life skills to the people. People have become more and more dependent upon automation, more and more dependent upon canned food, upon recipes being prepared for them, upon gardens being prepared for them, upon everything being done for them. Very, very few people know how to actually survive in the real world. Very few people know how to plant a seed, plant a garden. People don't know how to hunt, they don't know how to trap, they don't know how to fish. A lot of people don't even know how to set up a tent, how to create shelter for themselves if they would be trapped in the forest. You might think, well, why would people need such skills? We have all these cities now, we have everything automated, we have GPSs, we have mobile phones. We don't need all of that old stuff, it's all so passé. We're beyond that now. But are we really beyond that, or has this been done by design? Because when you get a population that is bereft of life skills, if that population suffers any type of disaster or cataclysm or world-changing event, then how do the people survive? How do they get through? Who do they look to for leadership if they're not able to lead themselves? Especially if the leaders aren't able to lead either. They might be able to lead on paper. They might be able to lead if they're a politician, but how do they lead an expedition or a hunting party or a party to construct shelter or forage for food or any of the stuff they may need to do, should there be some type of cataclysm or some type of disaster? Should there be some type of world-changing event, such as a extended ice age due to a grand solar minimum? How do the people survive such an event if suddenly the power goes out and they don't have their GPSs, they don't have their cell phones, they don't have any access to their houses or anything like that because it's all digital locks and the power's off? How do people make it through this type of a situation? Because the real problem is that should such a situation arise, the people will instantly expect the government to be there to save them. But why would they expect that? Because the government isn't this all-powerful thing. The government is simply a bunch of people, the same as them. And what if that's not what the role of government is? Not really. What if government was simply there to distract you and keep you contained and keep you under control? And you just thought the government was there to protect you. And how much of it is simply a distraction, keeping us from looking at what is going on behind the scenes? How much of it is keeping us worried about what this system is doing rather than realizing that the system is fiction, the system is non-existent, and the system is as fragile as everything else, as fragile as life. And soon the system is not going to matter at all, because in an environment such as a frozen ice age environment, I mean, who cares about the system? It's not going to be about any type of smart grid. It's going to be about what you can do and what knowledge you have to make it through a very, very harsh environment as a fragile human being. But again, it's all just part of the theatre, part of the distraction, all part of the plan to prevent us from ever really noticing what is actually going on with our home. You know, and the more and more that I look at this, the more and more it would not surprise me at all if that's what's going on. And I know these are really sort of esoteric things to think about. Some of this might be very confrontational for people to think about, you know, this type of reality. You know, the concept of the world is so vastly different to what we've been told. And the concept of reoccurring cataclysms, the concept of recycling of human consciousness, the gradual dumbing down of human consciousness, and even the concept of all of these rabbit holes being put there simply to distract us and to help in what is known as the externalization of the hierarchy. As I've mentioned before, you expose the system, you expose the workings of the mechanism, the revelation of the method, so that people become willing participants in the corruption which is condemning themselves and the rest of the world to wherever it is that we go after this experience. You know, I know it's very confronting to look at all of this sort of stuff, folks, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed. I mean, all possibilities need to be put on the table, all options need to be considered. There is no right or wrong in any of the stuff we're looking at. I mean, sure, there are wrong things. It's wrong to hurt people. It's wrong to inflict yourself and others. It's wrong to do any type of willful damage. We know what is right and we know what is wrong. But in looking at the theories that we have, in looking at the rabbit holes we go down, there is no right or wrong in any of this discussion. All there is an attempt at reaching some level of understanding of the human condition and some level of understanding of the environment and the world in which we live in and what it really means to be human and what we are facing in this world, you know? I mean, if this is real, if these recycling cataclysms happen, if these reoccurring situations do happen, if there are civilizations beneath civilizations beneath civilizations and new ones built on top all the time, and there are people taken to underground bases and the earth is repopulated after each of these cycles, if all of this stuff is going on, the question is why? If it isn't some sort of a soul harvest, then what is it for? What is the purpose of all this? I mean, if this was simply the world that we live in and it was subject to recycling cataclysms, recurring cataclysms, wouldn't it simply be beneficial to create a reality or a society that can adapt to these cataclysms and live according to them happening all the time and just find a way through it all? Why is all of this stuff so hidden? Why are we kept running on the treadmill? Why are we kept in a situation where we have to pay to be alive? Why is all of this stuff done to us to keep us so distracted from what it means to be human? There's got to be a higher purpose to it all. And that's really what becomes the most interesting part about it, folks. And that's what really starts to reaffirm a lot of this in your mind when you start looking at it as well, because we all go through life and we think, well, and there's got to be something more to all this. Why? Why is everything the way it is? Why am I here? What's it all about? You start looking at all this and factoring all this in as a possibility, and everything actually begins to make a little bit of sense. So really, when you look at that, it comes back to you, the individual. What your moral compass is and what your emotional state is through all this. How much of this are you prepared to really look at? How much of this are you prepared to consider? How much of what you do in your life is about finding your own path through it and finding out what it means to be you, what you really are and who you really are? And how much of it is about distraction? How much of it is about running around between the lines, trying to keep your head above water, simply so that you don't notice what's going on? And how many of the things you are actually doing in your life are actually important? How many of them are important to being a good human being, to raising your children in the right way, to being a good parent, a good brother, a good sister, a good friend? You might think, well, everything I'm doing is regarding that because I'm working to earn a good living and all this sort of stuff. But, take out the fact that you have to pay to be alive. Remove that factor. If you didn't have to pay to be alive, how many things are you doing which are beneficial to actually some sort of a valid contribution of the human experience? How much of them are beneficial and how much of them are really about finding yourself and being the best of all you can be in a real human environment? You find not much of it is, folks. Most of it is all revolved around the economic system. And the economic system is not anything that supports humankind. The economic system is a system which is designed to enslave mankind and to turn most of the world into a rubbish tip in order to keep the economic model going. So that's not any way to judge what it means to be a good person. And the question is, how much of your life is about finding what it means to be human and about understanding this realm that we live in? And how much of it is put there to simply keep you looking in the other direction? These are very sobering questions for people to ask, and I think they're very life-changing questions for people to ask. I think if enough people could be encouraged to ask these questions, perhaps we would create a better future. And and whatever the future holds, or whatever the human experience is, I really don't think it needs to be like this. I really think we could do far better if we could simply wake up to ourselves. What is important is understanding ourselves and understanding what's going on here. I guess the first point towards that is understanding that those who are running this place certainly do not have our best interest at heart and have certainly not been giving us the right information for us to ever be able to understand this reality at all. That's a given. That's a given. And when you really do begin to understand the depths of the lie that we're facing, well, it becomes pretty apparent why it's necessary for people to put all these belief systems down. It doesn't matter what you believe is going on here, folks. The fact is that you don't know, because none of us do, because none of us have ever been privy to the real information. What we do know is that what we're told simply is not true. And again, that's a given.